3222. Always the best way to start this is with some angel numbers. So I am just going to give this a minute and see if anybody comes on. So my name is Sheena, and this is Gene Key Contemplations by Rise Wellness in a collaboration with the Sacred Wild. And I am so excited to be going through the Gene Key of the week. So this week we're going to be looking at Gene Key 6, which is the shadow of conflict, the gift of diplomacy, and the Siddhi, or the divine essence of peace. So for this call, we're just going to be going into some information, some contemplation around this gene and how it might show up for us, as well as the astrology, because as we know with the gene keys, we're combining the philosophy of the I Ching with human design, which human design looks at our current astrology. So they're all woven and tied in together because these are essentially our archetypal journeys of awakening. And so that being said, I'm going to go ahead and just start us off with just a reminder that our presence here is the greatest gift. So I just want to humbly say thank you, thank you, thank you for taking the time to be here, whether you are jumping in later to this call or you are watching the recording. I just value you so much, and the attention and intention that's directed towards these contemplations. It means the world to me, because this is how we actually raise our vibration and therefore spread this frequency out, especially this particular one. This is something that radiates out of our aura. And so the more excavating that we do into our own psyche, as within, so without, the more that we are actually healing the world. And so this is pretty big stuff to be a part of. And so take care of yourself in this space. If there's something that comes up that feels triggering to you, that maybe you want to take a glass of water, take a restroom break, pause, take 5, come back to it at another time, know that that's always available for you. These calls are being recorded, so you will listen to them when feels good for you. So one of the things I always like to preface when it comes to gene keys is when we add awareness to anything, or putting our attention and our intention into something, we're going to co-create, we're going to manifest it. And so as we're adding awareness into our shadow work, we might find these little gremlins that come up, and these gremlins might want to shame us, might want to guilt us, might want to say that we don't deserve hearing this information. And so it's really, really, really important for us to combine the programming partner in this week of this gene of compassion, to really see that we're reparenting ourselves right now through every single time that we excavate and go through our own psyche. So how can we take care of ourselves? If that means taking a pause, coming back to it, know that you're supported in that. If it means reaching out on the Mighty Network to say, hey, I'm having some big feelings, chat about them, connect with your community. That's what it's for. And so, reach out to me specifically as well. I do gene key readings. I do astrology readings. I do tarot readings. I do intuitive channeled readings, where we can just pull in your spirit guides to help you navigate some of the things that are coming up. So just want to put that out there. You can find me on Instagram at Rise Wellness Village. And also you can contact me through sundancesanctuary.com as well. And so, these calls are being recorded, as I said, so that you can always come back to them. So the next thing I'd like to do, since we are looking at the astrology of the week, is drop us into our collective soul with a guided meditation. And so this meditation is looking at our transfer from one season to another season. So we're getting ready for the equinox this week. And so here we are, Gene Key 6, coming into a place of the highest expression of peace. Now, this peace really is a huge embodiment of not only our Virgo archetype, but the Libra archetype. So the Libra archetype comes online this week, and this is about justice. And so perfect time for justice, equality, fairness is the equinox. So the equinox is when we split the years into parts, and now we're going to start going into the darker part of the year. This is when we start going into our fall season. We go into a refining process where we look at all those big expansive ideas that we had and we refine them. Which one do we actually want to bring to fruition? Which were just cool ideas that maybe we'll bounce off to somebody else that can take it away for us. So this is kind of that opportunity for us to refine, come into harmony, come into sacred union by finding our own balance. So Libra season, all about balance, equinox, equal parts when we look at the etymology of the word. And so this is going to be a guided meditation on balance. This particular guided meditation is coming from my girl, my fellow astrologer, Jenny Nicholas. And so I'm going to be reading a script on this one. And so I'm just inviting you to begin by taking a few deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth, letting something go with each exhale and allowing something to soften. So let's do that a couple more times in your own rhythm, in your own cadence, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth, allowing something to go and inviting something to soften. In through the nose, and out through the mouth, letting something go, allowing something to soften. If you haven't already, let's find a comfortable position to begin this meditation on balance. You may wish to soften your gaze or close down your eyes. As much as possible, find yourself in balance in terms of how much weight is on your right side and how much is on your left side. How forward or how far back you are leaning. And just see where your center is today and find your way towards it. You might notice that you become in and out of balance for the entirety of this meditation. And that's to be expected. Balance is a constant adjustment. So for a moment, put a little bit too much weight on your right side and just see how that feels. And then come back to center. And then put a little bit too much weight on your left side. Lean a little further on your left than you normally would. And then come back to center. Now lean a little further back than you normally would. And then come back to center. You might even begin to spiral your body, just like a circle around the center, going from left to right, and then spiraling in the other direction. Just circling the torso around the hips and feeling your weight unevenly distributed. And then moving back to center. Feel a couple of deep inhales fill your lungs. And just begin to notice your breath. Notice how your mind shifts as soon as you put awareness on the breath. It doesn't usually last long, but you might notice a moment of relief just by focusing on the inhale and the exhale. Notice the balance of the inhale and the exhale. Or maybe you notice the imbalance of the two. You don't have to make them the same length. Just notice if they are naturally or if one is longer than the other. Feel your body. Notice where your body feels in balance. And notice where it feels out of balance. Send a breath to any part of the body that feels a little off balance. Breathe into that part of your body. Imagine that that part of your body could inhale and exhale with your lungs. Imagine that it could softly stretch with the inhale and relax with the exhale. Feel the coolness of the inhale and the warmth of your exhale. And just notice the temperature. And feeling beneath you, your past, the ground that you're on, the layers of earth, the tectonic plates that form every experience, every thought, every action, every part of every layer underneath you. Feel yourself on that ground, the ground of your past, the ground that has given birth to this moment, to everything that has led up to now. And then feel yourself sitting on that ground of your being in this present moment. And watching the present moment fall away to become yet another layer of ground for you to be upon. And feeling above you and all around you the moment that you're moving into, growing into. Feel also your becoming. Feel the ground that you are on, the ground of your being. Feel, sense the energetic field that you are growing into, expanding into, unfolding into, and becoming into. And in between that two things is you, fully present, grounded, open to what is. Feel the balance between your past and your future. And in the center of those two realities is you. Trusting the ground is beneath you and unfolding is occurring. Feel your breath. Feel its balance. Feel your body. Feel the room that you're in. And slowly begin to stretch a little and move if you like, bringing some life back to your fingers and toes. And just take note if you feel any different than when you began this meditation. Take note of anything that you learned about balance today and how it feels in your body. We are human pendulums, and we have the ability at any time to align and attune to our higher selves by coming into sacred union, as within, so without. If you haven't already, you may open your eyes to come back into this Gene Key contemplation with Sheena. Namaste. Thank you for dropping in with me and allowing this opportunity for aligning and attuning for all. I love you. Namaste. So, Gene Key 6. This is a great emotional master key. This is all about how we find peace from within, how we're able to cultivate peace no matter what's happening around us. Our ability to regulate our nervous system is our greatest currency. And this is something that we're all really being taught in big ways right now. Is when we go through these big roller coaster waves of emotions and these big frequencies continue to come onto our planet to allow this softening, but also this collapse of one way of being into another. How do we support ourselves through all those cataclysmic shifts and changes? And so this friction of what conflict is that we see in every shadow state, in all the 64 genes, in every shadow state, what this conflict is, it's the friction between dualities. So this 3D reality that we live on, it's all about contrast. We have light and we have dark. We have masculine and we have feminine. We have these polarities, and it's because of those polarities that we have transmutation, that we have transfiguration, that we have an alchemical process. And this particular gene is one of the great alchemical processes that will happen in our body. When we go through an awakening experience, oftentimes people will say, you actually look so much different than you used to. Your whole aura has changed. And this is because of the actual alchemical process of transmutation that happens on a biologic level within our anatomy. And this is something that we're all going through on a collective right now. As we access these higher streams of consciousness, we're not even able to carry them all in our body. Our body is so magnetic, is so highly charged that it's going to take an entire transmutation of our physical body to go into the next phase of our evolution. So as we go through these periods of awakening, it feels wildly uncomfortable. And that is this burning of our karma. It truly is this internal burning, and it happens in our gut. So that's why when you listen to, people like Dr. Zach Bush, he's doing such amazing things with biology because he's helping us understand that our gut biome is our brain. So our brain is just using our vagus nerve to detect what's the data in our gut, and then what do we do with that data, and how do we regulate our nervous system, how do we distribute our energy appropriately to keep us alive. And so when we're stuck in a fight or flight survival place, we're not operating very efficiently because we're using so much of ourselves to be defensive, to protect, to put walls around our heart. And we don't even realize how depleting that is to our natural energy until we actually come into the process of awakening. And we realize awakening is about dropping the defense. It's about actually being transparent. It's about allowing ourselves to be vulnerable with the most sensitive parts of our being. And when we actually allow those protector parts to diffuse, to soften, that's when we have these sudden enlightenment experience, these quantum shifts in our reality, these huge, unbelievable breakthroughs, these miracles. It's how we heal. So this is how someday, there's somebody out there that, gets a cancer diagnosis and it leads them down a spiral of having no faith, while somebody else gets that same diagnosis and lights a fire in their ass that says, I'm going to beat this. It's all about what we perceive as our reality, which aligns us to the vibration that we walk into. The world doesn't give us what we want, it gives us who we are. That's the vibrational reality. And so this gift of peace is asking us, no matter what's going on around us, if we are stuck in wildfires, if we are stuck in the Middle East, if we're being repressed in our relationship, if we're being suffocated at work, if we're being, in these karmic loops with our family, how are we breaking free from these patterns or these divisive things to actually get curious about everything that we're co-creating? So we can say, I need to find and cultivate peace within me so that I can handle all this stuff around me. And so this friction, this contrast that we have in this 3D reality is, like I said, with oppression, we have this fear within us that somebody's going to take our life away. On a genetic level, this is the reptilian fear that came in with a lot of our programming. And so maybe some of us have already done that purifying and that shadow work to excavate that. But on a collective level, most people are still operating in that fear that someone's going to hurt them, that someone's going to actually take their life because of something that's already happened within us. And usually this is from our early childhood, where at some point in our psyche, we feared for our life. It was life or death. We didn't know and where our next meal was going to come from. We didn't know how safe we were to emotionally express in our family of dynamics. However it showed up for us, there were life or death experiences that we had. And it was, how did we learn to regulate ourselves after life traumatized us. And so the dilemma of this gene is those protector parts of us that want to be seen, that want to be felt. And they have good reason to, because at some point in our lives, at least within our genetic makeup, whether it was actually in our lives or it was in something from the collective wound or a past life experience that's really charged in our lifeline. And that's what karma is. That's what these patterns that go through our fractal patterns in our family are. These are the karma that we're here to transmute. And until we transmute it, it's going to keep charging up so much in us that we're going to have that breaking point. It's like either I give up on everything or I give in to everything. And so on a repressive nature, these are the people that are victims of their emotions, so they can't differentiate between a logical place and an emotional place. Now, there has to be both in our dynamics. We don't get rid of our critical thinking mind in spirituality. That's a very important part of us. But we have to turn the observer on with our critical thinking mind and say, why is my protector on right now? And what kind of data can I learn from it? Instead of exiling ourselves or casting judgment on others, what can I learn from this? So in a repressive nature, these people are overly attentive. So the repressed nature of the shadow is concerned with maintaining peace between people regardless of the cost. And this pattern is based entirely upon fear and means that these people will totally compromise themselves in order to maintain control of their emotional environment. This is the defense pattern of overattentiveness, and these are the people pleasers. The repressive nature will sweep conflict under the carpet by adopting any behavior that will keep it at bay. The problem here is that unless conflict is dealt with transparently, it tends to eventually explode. The overattentive nature is at its core deeply false, which means that it'll invoke unconscious distrust in others. Overattentive natures always tend to draw tactless natures to them, resulting in some spectacularly dysfunctional relationships in family dynamics. When these people finally develop the courage to face conflict, they realize it was never as bad as they feared. Reactive nature, these people are tactless. The other side of this sixth shadow, is unable to contain its emotions at all. Lack of emotional tact and timing betrays a low frequency nature that inevitably results in a backlash. These people are always finding themselves in difficult emotional situations, which they make worse by giving vent to their anger, as well as projecting it onto others. They are unable to take responsibility for their own volatile feelings. Their most common defense is to lash out and then storm away. The dilemma of this tactless nature is that it's deaf to its own lack of tact. These people assume that the problem is always in the other person, which unfortunately earns them no friends and makes it very difficult for others to get close to them. The only kind of person who will remain with such a pattern is the overattentive nature described above. The secret to breaking this pattern is for reactive natures to take full responsibility for their emotions instead of remaining stuck in a teenager mentality. So I wanted to read that because I think it's really important to look at how these can manifest as someone, as Carl Jung would say, is introverted or extroverted. Someone that represses tends to shut down and kind of collapses around them, more of like guilt, shame, this is me, I did this, I did this. Otherwise is more extroverted, reactive. It explodes onto others, projects onto others instead of taking any ownership. So it's important to see how we relate in each of these genes on a victim pattern, because many of us to some capacity still carry an ego with some victim pattern in it, so we can fall into this shadow of conflict. And so, really what this shadow of conflict is, it's the part of ourselves that we don't like. It's the part of ourselves that we haven't accepted yet. And so what do? We transmute that onto somebody else. We project it onto somebody else. We project it onto some kind of relationship, whether it's a relationship with a food, a substance, or it's a relationship with a person or a dynamic. And so the way to really rise up in this frequency, to come out of the conflict, is to turn on that observer so that we let go of our defenses and we transform it into our vulnerability. So we actually get quiet, we learn from it, and then we get willing to share about it. So this might be having a conversation with a loved one and say, hey, you know what? That thing that you did really triggered me. And if you can hold some space, I'd really like to share what came up for me. This is how I perceived that. This is the conflict that arises within me. This didn't make me feel safe, or this made me feel uncomfortable, or this made me revisit an old time where I got hurt by this thing. But when we can have that amount of authentic communication in our conversations with our loved ones, that's when that heat, that buildup really vaporizes, because we're met with so much empathy and compassion. Maybe there's even an emotional release for you or for that person. But whatever is there within that space, that torus field of energy has created this empathy that's there. When we can authentically share, I experienced this. It's so much different than you did this to me. I'm sharing my emotional experience, and that cannot be right or wrong. That just is. The most sacred thing is what is. We trick ourselves when we fall into the polarity of the 3D reality. Light is not better than dark. They're simply on different sides of the spectrum and different sides of the exact same coin. In order to go high, we need to go low. So we can't bypass any part of the experience. And so when it comes down to it, we can't heal when we have all this protection around our hearts. So we need to take down the defenses. And so this gene allows yourself to be hurt. It says, I actually am going to be vulnerable. I'm going to soften. I'm not going to armor up. I'm going to soften and I'm going to learn from this experience. What is this conflict here to teach me? What's coming up in my body? How does it feel in my body when I feel conflict? Yesterday, we had a scorpionic moon. Scorpio is an intense energy. I had a rage fit outside. For me, I had so much energy and I had to release it. And I had to release it in a way that was safe for me. So I immersed myself in nature, in the woods. I got sticks and I just started beating the earth with it, beating the trees with it, because I knew the tree could handle me. I know Mother Nature is asking for me to express what she's using me to express. She can't pick up the stick and battle the tree. That's why I'm here, because I'm feeling that energy of we need to transmute this, move something through. It feels like a cauldron. It feels like a bubbling up of heat. You know, when you think about lower vibrations, you think about the fire, you think about discomfort, it's that heat rising in the body. So you don't want to keep it stuck in your gut and have heartburn. You want to keep it stuck in your heart and feel a broken heart. You definitely don't want to keep it stuck in your throat like you can't swallow. So you let it out. You let it all the way out. Maybe it comes into a poem or a dance or a scream or a yell or a deep diaphragmatic breath. But it's the assignment to feel that current of energy every time that we feel these energies, just allowing it in, no matter what it is, without the judgment. Then we can move up and through it. After I expressed that, channeled that anger through me, no one was hurt. No one was around me that was going to be affected negatively by what I was doing. And so I got to go through my whole process. It only took 90 seconds. That's all it really takes to move all the way through that current of energy, that Kundalini fire that was rising. And then I held myself against the tree. I gave her a big hug. I leaned up against her. I sat down with her. I allowed the emotional release. The alchemical process went from the fire in my body into tears releasing. And I just sat there feeling so held by Mother Earth. I felt so much peace from within me. And I cultivated that peace. And that peace was on the other side of that rage. But that rage needed to come out. And so when you look at internal family systems, which I have found to be such a beautiful way to support me in my spiritual awakening, and looking with a gentle heart at some of the dysfunctions that I navigated in my early childhood, I was able to see why I have such a strong protector part of me. And so this gene, the energy of this gene, really brought that scorpionic death of who that Kali is inside of me. And she fights for social justice. She advocates for people to be allowed to express, to be free and liberated to be themselves without having to stuff some part of it. It was my assignment to co-create a childhood where my parents would say, shh, keep it down. Or, girls should be seen more than they're heard. When you hear that kind of programming, when you're an expressive kid, I'm a Leo rising, sign, I'm a Pisces sun, so I feel everything, but I want to express. And then I co-create a dynamic of family of origin that doesn't have parents that know how to access those deep emotions. So for them, me being in my full expression was not safe for them. They didn't know what to do with it. So I built up a protector inside of me. And so when I felt big emotions, that protector formed a whole identity. That protector could lash out at somebody because of an injustice. That protector could self-sabotage and say, Sheena, it's not safe to access this amount of rage. So let's try to dim it down. Let's try to mute it. So when we look in these contemplations, what we're doing is adding awareness to what does conflict feel like in your body? And what did conflict look like in your early childhood dynamic? Was it safe for you to be angry? Was it safe for you to talk back? We all have that sacred wild within us. And there's a part of our psyche that wants to challenge authority. And so when that came online, what happened to that part? Because that's the part that we're accessing this week. That part is that protector part that wanted to keep us so safe. It wanted to keep us alive. And sometimes life or death meant shutting down the fire of our rage because it wasn't safe. We weren't allowed or invited to lash back at our caregivers or lash back at the people around us, because that would have put us in even more danger than we already were. So if that's your experience, finding peace means expressing that protector part of you. And one thing that I can say with so much conviction is I used to have such a fear about, what if she's too furious? What if she's too passionate? What if she's too angry? What if she's too violent? So I was afraid of really getting into her. But once I started working with that Kali within me, I realized she's not trying to burn the house down at all. She's not even trying to act on 99.9% of the data that comes through. She just wants someone to give her the space to journal about it, to talk it into the ethers, to voice note it with a healer, to share it in my intimate conversations, to talk about it with my partner. That protector part of me just wants to be heard and seen and known. It's okay for you to have this amount of emotion. because on the other side of that emotion is the contrast, right? So when we go through the crunchy conflict, we're so liberated because it's always so much bigger than we really think it is in our brain. And so when we actually allow ourselves to be diplomatic, we come into the higher essence of this gene. We say, this is the fight worth having, and this is not the fight worth having externally. Maybe this needs more detective work on my own. Maybe there's a wound that's coming in up. I'm just projecting it right now. So we come back again to the archetype of Virgo. So on the high road, Virgo is a saint. On the low road, Virgo judges the shit out of everybody. Virgo has such a standard that if anybody's not doing it in the exact same way, Virgo could consider it wrong. And that puts us right back into that 3D matrix, that simulation, that there's a right and there's a wrong. As soon as we do that, we enter that polarity. We come out of that quantum field of consciousness, and then there's a victim story that comes with that way of thinking. So one of the gifts of this authentic communication is that it affects everything around us. So as soon as we're able to cultivate that level of authentic communication, the people that we're sharing it with are going to be transformed, are going to be transmuted. Because now there's this field of unconditional love in this space that says, I love you beyond guilt and blame and shame and any other distorted projection that I could use to label as something as bad. And so if this person isn't in integrity, if their soul hasn't signed up to evolve and continue to ascend with you, guess what? They're not a vibrational match. They're going to move out of the way. You don't even have to do anything about it. That's how benevolent this universe is. It's going to come in and say, swoop, see you later. Not in this season. Not now, Satan. And it does the work for you. So your assignment is to express, share, give yourself the safety of knowing that your protective parts can be heard, can be safe to come online. Because if they're not, that's when we create the internal conflict, because we're suppressing, we're diminishing, we are not allowing the most sacred thing to be what is. We're telling it that's not allowed. So this gift, when we allow this a level of authenticity, then we realize this gift, especially if you have this in your genetic makeup, this is someone that feels everything. This is someone that is in commune with another. So this is what empathy really is. It's merging with all. It's being in the field of oneness. And so when you have that ability to cultivate peace from within, then even in the shadow frequency of conflict, you're radiating that peace out and around you. And you might not know it at the time, but you are affecting a lot of people. And it can take a lot of time to catch up with you to even realize the impact you're having on others. But eventually it will. Eventually people, it feels like osmosis, are going to start to clean up their act. Maybe go through a metamorphosis, an alchemical shift of getting rid of some self-limiting behaviors, or all of a sudden people are not gossiping around you because they know that you don't hold yourself to, you hold yourself to a higher standard, that level of conduct is just not orbiting around you. You're not low vibrationally gossiping and judging others. You're actually observing others with a new level of compassion, which compassion is the programming partner for this gene. So it's so beautiful how they come together. What do you have with peace? You have compassion. This is empathy. When you commune with others, when you allow this level of transparency, that I allow you to see me, intimacy into me, I see. I allow myself to be seen. And it's from that place that we open ourselves up to higher states of consciousness, to literally higher dimensions, for love to flow through us. We're a channel for this higher dimension to come through us. So in the Gene Keys, we talk a lot about evolution and involution. Involution is when these higher dimensions flow through us. And evolution is this ascension, bringing these higher dimensions back up to where they came from. So when you think about, the law of return, everything must come back to its original starting point. So when you're radiating this peace goes out in every one of your prayers, and it has it has to come back to its original point. So that peace always comes back to you. That's why to give is the same as to receive. Good is on the other spectrum of bad. We've just been judging good for being better than being bad. And so there's a quote that I love by Robert Edward Grant that says, when the desire for love supersedes our need for truth, the world will know peace. I'm going to say that again one more time because I think it's so beautiful. It's data that I had stumbled across, and the way he articulated it. I think this is how he articulated it. At least this is how my brain remembered it to articulate it. But when the desire for love supersedes our need for truth, the world will know peace. And this is absolutely my own experience. When my desire to be intimately connecting in partnership with my beloved supersedes the need for me to be right and him to be wrong, we just allow our truths to be heard and expressed and empathized with, compassionately cared for. That's when I embody peace. That's when I get to feel peace. And that's when we get to have peace within our union that emanates from around us. Now, I get very lucky in this one because not only am I empathetic, but my partner actually has this one in his hologenetic profile. So our communion, our ability to empathize and merge with one another shows me this alchemical process, this transmutation, and allows me to really cultivate peace in this relationship that I can feel when I'm in times of conflict. There's such a peace, such a container, a universal field of peace that we have cultivated, that even when we're on different sides of the country, if I'm in stress, I can come back into that communion and I can merge with the peace that's there because it starts from within. So it's so beautiful in the contemplation that Richard Rudd shares. He talks about Michelangelo's block of marble. This is who we are. We are the genius that's already in there. So Michelangelo was chipping away at this block. And as we chip away, we're chipping away the karma. We're chipping away the conflict. We're chipping away the collective bullshit that's not even ours, was only meant to bring us back into divine union, to say, oh, that doesn't feel good. You know how beautiful is our body? That every single time it comes out of harmony, it tells us, it shares it with us. Maybe we get a pimple as something's trying to come out and be released. Maybe we get tired because we need water in our body. Maybe we get angry because we need someone to hold space for us. Maybe we need rest because we've, exerted a lot of energy. So our body is constantly communicating with us. It's this divine instrument. And so beginning in this practice, this contemplation, we did a meditation on balance. So every time we come out of balance, how can we come back into it using our body? So I think it's so important to share some information on, using our body as a pendulum. This is just a practical guidance tip that I want to share with you, just in case you've never heard it before, because I think it's so valuable. And as we have so much noise out there, so much conflicting noise out there, it's important to keep bringing ourselves back into sacred union, uniting ourselves, the divine masculine, divine feminine within us. And so we have to keep coming back to the diplomacy, the diplomat within us through regulating our nervous system, through breath work, breath, sound, movement, touch. So this Kundalini energy that we experience, that we have from our awakening, this Kundalini energy is the release of all of that trapped energy that's in our shadows and that's in the collective shadows. So when we talk about this Kundalini awakening, what we're releasing and awakening is that trapped energy. And that energy can be angry, that energy can be full of grief, that energy can feel so oppressed by the world, it's been so victimized by the world, it's carrying this big old charge in it that the world's out to get it. So how can we hold that energy as who we are now, this embodied version, this maternal energy, this paternal energy? So we become our own parents to these energies. So now when this little ball comes out, this ball of Kundalini energy that feels like conflict, it feels like friction, it feels like we've got magnets that I'm repulsed by this and I can't be attracted to this. You know, what is it teaching us? How can we move through that data in a good way? Also, diplomacy is when we sense when to speak. Diplomacy is all about timing. Do you know your shit? Are you ready to embody that truth? Or is it just up here and it hasn't landed? Because people will feel the difference between someone that talks their talk and someone that walks their walk. And that's how beautiful this vibratory environment is that we all have access to, is we can feel in our body. Does this feel like truth? And when we use our body as a pendulum, I would invite you to do this standing instead of sitting as I am. But allow yourself to sit upright, bring yourself into center, into harmony, into balance, whatever that looks like for you. And then ask yourself, show me what my yes is. And I feel my body, in this case, move backwards. Now, maybe your body moves forwards. Maybe it moves right or moves left. But I'm very clearly saying, show me what my yes is. You can do it over and over again. It's going to show you the same thing. Okay, so right now in this moment, my yes pulls me backwards. Okay, now show me what my no is. Show me my, okay. All right, so that took a little bit. That took me anchoring my breath to really know and lock it in. My no is me moving backwards in this moment, on this position that I'm currently in. It doesn't mean it's the same for you. So in a world with so much noise out there, can you practice becoming a pendulum and seeing what does no feel like in my body? What does my sacred no feel like in my body? What does my sacred yes feel like in my body? Get curious about it. Learn about it. Allow the divine instrument of your body to teach you so that when you come into a time of conflict, you can allow your body, your higher self, to commune with you. Your body can always re-regulate. No matter what's going on around you, you always have the ability to cultivate peace from within you. And when our intuition is turned on, this is a lot of times an indication that there's some data that we need to work with for whatever that feels, however that feels in your body, when that intuition is highly charged, whether it feels like you have a story in there, like it's coming from a wound or a trigger, or it feels like it's coming from a grounded nervous system, whichever articulation of the story of the trigger that you have. If your body is giving you a big indication of something, it's saying, pay attention to me. This is a great opportunity to acknowledge how powerful your intuition is. It's always here to teach you. How can you put yourself, your observer in the seat next to you to say, okay, trigger, okay, conflict. What are you here to teach me right now? How can I sit with this? Where do I feel this in my body? How can I breathe into that part? I breathe into that part. Guess what? I've unlocked more data that's there. That data, to bring it all back into union. All you had to do is a couple deep breaths. That story is gone, been transmuted out of here. Or maybe there's something more that's coming up. There's a little golden thread there. So can you take the time to get curious about it? The people that have this gene truly have the power to change the world. And I know that we all do, and I know that we have the ability to contemplate this gene and become really close with this gene. But there is something to be said about literally having it in us, because you're going to notice huge alchemical changes in your body where people might even say, I didn't even know that was you. You look so different than you used to. You grow into these different versions of yourself. So once our boundaries come down, once our defenses come down, we have an army of kindness. That's who we truly are, these bringers of the light. And so the Siddhi of this gene, this is, what some people might think is the ideal of world peace. And some people might think that this is a crazy idea. But guess what? Peace comes about when love is allowed to expand. And there's no limit to how much love can expand and grow and create into. So when all of our karma has been burnt off, the atomic structure of the human goes through this quantum change, this metamorphosis. Just like we talked about with the dragonfly, we go through this major alchemical shift and change. And our subtle bodies are dimensions that we're capable of accessing. And so if we ever thought that, these aliens were these beings outside of us, I would invite you to consider how many fields of energy are around you. And as you access these different fields of your own energetic field, these are dimensions. Different beings exist on these different dimensions, in these different planes of existence. So you could say that the aliens are out there. I say I am the alien. I am the starseed. I have these memories of different lives. I have this intuitive channel from these different beings. And I'm at peace knowing that that's my reality. That might conflict against somebody else's personal reality, but that's their truth. And the diplomatic part of me can say we are both allowed to have our own experiences in this world. Some people is going to perceive reality much different than I perceive reality. I mean, I'm a highly sensitive being. I get psychic downloads all the time. I commune with beings all the time. This is a reality that's a stark contrast to the dynamics of the origins from the family I grew up in. That in itself can have its own conflict in navigating. So what's so interesting about this Siddhi is with this peace, all seeking ends, evolution ends. There's no reason to evolve anymore because we found peace. We don't have to become anymore. We already became, we did it. So that is really a huge, juicy nugget that I really want to invite into this contemplation, especially from what I said. So Sun in Virgo, the moon in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is the philosopher, is the deep thinker, is the spiritual teacher. I've got a lot of Sagittarius in my chart, which makes me really excited to be channeling this information on today, because we also have this huge Neptune influence right now, and we will for the next couple of days. So guess what this means? This means we've got the theme of, how am I here to serve in the greatest way with the biggest impact to heal humanity? And with Neptune, that's all about our fantasies, our visions, our imagination. Neptune says, go big. Whatever you wanted to create times 10, you can have that. So whatever you're wanting to manifest right now, and let's cultivate this peace. Let's say this is the physical manifestation on peace, on world peace that we want to bring in. And I think every being on this planet right now, aiding in our collective consciousness, is or has this dream of cultivating world peace. And that's why we're here all in this collective breath in this moment now, as we're radiating this peace, because we're taking an hour each week to look at our shadows, to see how it comes out, to move through it. So on my Instagram, every week I put on Wisdom Keeper's story, where we will look at the oracle of the week, and we share about the questions for contemplation. We share about the story that comes up. So I'm going to read the questions for contemplation on this live. But I don't think I'm going to do the Wisdom Keeper story. Or am I? We got 10 minutes left. I could keep going and going and going. Talking about gene keys and consciousness is kind of my favorite. But let's just kind of come to a close, because I've got so many things that I want to add as well. Let's see. So this gene is a very musical gene. So I know, like, there are times where I feel a melody or a note or a chord that comes online, and this chord is either very melodic or it's a discord. So I invite you, as you're working in your contemplation around this gene, to notice any of the melody that comes along as you contemplate this gene. Also, it's important to note that what we're doing here collectively, but also as within, so without, but as we are accessing these higher states of consciousness on our planet at this time, the extremes are being neutralized. So this 3D reality, it's kind of already gone. But in this scheme of this contemplation, because there are still beings that are living in that paradigm, there is the extremes that are being brought to the surface. So, you know, what I have seen so much as we're moving into this unity consciousness, we're moving into the spirit of oneness. So anything that would really trigger that spirit of oneness is highly inflamed right now. So this may be showing up as a lot of narcissists, potentially as one flavor. This is how it shows up in my life. Doesn't have to be everybody's, but someone that's not ready to abandon their sense of self is having a really hard time right now, because those extremes are being neutralized. So abandoning their sense of self, when they're clutching so tightly to their sense of self because they haven't embodied empathy, because their auric field is so tightly wound around them because of traumas they haven't processed. So their sense of self becomes over inflated. And that's what narcissism is. When we peel back all those layers, you actually have someone that's really been wounded and traumatized at probably a very young age, that wasn't protected. So those protector parts became so overinflated that as we're going through this collective rise of this feminine energy, that can feel really inflamed right now as they get neutralized. And so a lot of these genes we're going to talk about, you're hearing the story of the gene keys. This is that Christ consciousness that's on our planet right now. These beings that radiate peace. It's not about a check mark on your Instagram that you have such and such followers. It's not about the number in your bank account. It's the aura that these people radiate. And no one can take away your life. And that level of trust and knowing is where we're all headed. So when we started this contemplation, and even where we were last week, we're thinking about, where are you in opposition of life, or where do you think that someone's trying to oppress you? Where do you think that someone's out here causing you conflict because they want to take you down? Where are you projecting that reality of that protector that's still coming really online because it hasn't felt safe for a long time? And so now it doesn't really know how to express. It's still trying to find its way a little bit. So when we really step back into the divine essence of this gene, we can cultivate so much peace. But because when we've reached enlightenment, we don't fear death anymore. There is no death. We go from one way of being to another way of being. We release that fear, and holy Hannah, when we release that fear, we free up so much energy. And that is that energy that surges up through and around us. That's that snake kundalini awakening. And so when we take all that coiled energy that was pent up and repressed, it had this story, this victim story, we release the story. So some people will actually write a story, write a book to release that identity. Some people will change their name and say, I release myself from that personal reality. I move forward as this now. And so we all have a brand new data field, a collective field of consciousness that we have access to right now. And it doesn't have the karma. It doesn't have all of the baggage from the 3D bullshit. And so we can choose to stay in this field of unity consciousness, of universal love, or we can make the choice to go down and place ourselves in a victim mentality in order to evolve and ascend and learn. What I invite you to consider this week is how you can take your golden thread and weave anything from that old story into this new field of consciousness and discard the stuff that doesn't need to be there, because we are the embodiment of our ancestors' living prayer. And that is the truth of who we are now. And so whatever versions of you have learned a certain way of being, have operated in a certain way, you get to release that. You get to release the protector part to do what it's always wanted to do: express, be liberated, play, research, have fun, enjoy life, feel at peace. So that was a lot. And so there's two things that I want to do. And the first is read the questions for contemplation. Some things to think about. And you can go onto my Instagram at Rise Wellness Village and you can hear the full wisdom story with these questions for contemplation. And that's at Rise Wellness Village. But in the meantime, I'm just going to look at the questions instead of reading the whole story. Does your life often feel disordered and chaotic? Or do you tend towards being, oh, wow, that is not the right one. Ooh, sorry about that. Do you tend to avoid uncomfortable feelings through peacemaking or by overreacting and exacerbating conflict? Is there a current conflict in your life or a place where you're feeling defensive and your guard is up? What do you fear might happen if you stopped working so hard to please certain people? How can you take more responsibility for your feelings and express them in less reactive and more open, honest ways? In what area of your life is a little diplomacy needed? And what is a simple way you can cultivate peace in your life today? So there is a book that I wish everybody would read because it's such a good book. And it is called The Magdalene Manuscript, The Alchemies of Horus and the Sex Magic of Isis by Tom Kenyon and Judy Sion. I think that this is such an important read as we are looking at the rising of the divine feminine energies on our planet, as it also looks at the Christ consciousness and the language and the understanding of these frequencies and the stories and data around them. So this is a channeled text along with personal encounters, and there's a beautiful love story, where there's many beautiful love stories woven throughout this story. But there's one that I really wanted to share because when we look down at, when we look at life, when we look at relationships, when we look at conflict, we're all here to learn from each other. We're projecting conflict in order to come back to harmony. And this is about telling the truth. It's about vulnerability. It's about letting yourself be seen. And so I want to end with a little quote from the Magdalene Manuscript that says, and this is after an experience of having an uncomfortable clearing conversation. We had each told our truth. We stood there in the light of that long day and just stopped. We went home and just held each other. In truth, in total truth, no one has ever stopped my heart like Tom Kenyon. And he'll learn to see agendas, and I will learn to see other dimensions. But if I don't see other dimensions, it's okay with me. I've got Tom to tell me the truth of what's out there. And if he doesn't ever see other people's agendas around him, that's okay. He's got me. And as long as he appreciates my gifts and listens to me, and I appreciate his and listen to him, we have total sight between us. Magdalene was right. Appreciation, at the very least, is required. If you want to cultivate peace this week, then I invite you to authentically communicate what comes up in your desire for love. When you can accept the truth of the moment as the most sacred thing is what is, then we can release our need for truth. We can release our need from someone to be right and someone to be wrong, and we can know peace. We can feel it within us. I love you. Namaste.